Welcome to Cure America. It is great to be back here with you. It's been a little while since we were together. I had an opportunity to travel with a group of pastors to the Holy Land, to Israel. We had a great time with pastors and their wives. We had an opportunity to meet with President Herzog of Israel. We had a great time. He actually invited us to his home. I was surprised he took time out of his schedule to invite us in, but he was glad we were there. He appreciated our support during this time of war and uncertainty, so we were glad we had a chance to spend some time with him. I actually had a chance to ask him a question, so I shared this with the panel and with our audience. I asked him, what would you like me to take back to my congregation and to pastors and the people that I interact with about Israel? And he said, under no uncertain terms, this is our land. God blessed us with it through our patriarch Abraham, and we are not occupiers. And I said, okay. And so that's the message I'm bringing back. And so it was a great trip. We had the chance to visit some great sites, and we want to keep Israel accessible to Christians and non-Christians alike. It is a beautiful place. And I want to thank Brother Jonathan Alexandre for standing in for me while I was away. I've had a chance to watch some of the shows. Great job, great discussion. So I really appreciate that, Jonathan.
Certainly, sir.
And as we look at our panelists today, again, this is Jonathan Alexandre, Vice President of Government Affairs for Liberty Counsel Action. We have, of course, sitting with us, Chris Ullman, President of the Eagle Forum, and of course, my colleague here at CURE, Marty Dannenfelser, Government Relations and Coalitions. President Trump has a lot going on right now. Our economy is a big deal right now. He's in the middle of negotiations, I think, what is it, 70 plus countries? I don't know how you do that, but that's a monumental task. So he's having a lot of discussions, trying to break down barriers for access to foreign markets, for American companies, for Americans in general. And at the same time, President Trump is calling on the Federal Reserve Chairman Powell to reduce interest rates. I know they've reduced rates in England, and they're calling on Chairman Powell to reduce them. And Powell is exerting his independence. And when he thinks it's time, I think that's when he says he'll lower rates. But at the current time, he's expressing that this is probably not a good time in his mind to do it. So him and President Trump and I are having a little bit of back and forth. But in the meantime, Congress has passed a budget resolution for 2025, which is really good. And now they're working to assemble a budget reconciliation bill to fund several of President Trump's priorities, like national security, border security. He's trying to cut federal spending over the next 10 years. Haven't they been trying to cut federal spending for a long time? But hopefully they can succeed in doing that. And President Trump has achieved the tax cuts in his first term, and they're trying to extend those tax cuts in this current White House, and we'll hopefully that'll get approved. And he's trying to, some of the regulations that President Biden put in place, he's trying to cut some of those and change some of those outcomes. And so as we look at what's going on economically, I have a question for you. There's a lot of topics we just mentioned, but our national economy is a top priority. And I think it's not just here, but around the globe. Economics is a big thing, a big issue. So let me ask you, where do you think things stand at the moment? And what do you expect to happen on the policy and the ideas over the next few weeks and months? Let's start with you, Chris. What do you think?
Well, I think it's going to be a very, very big job to get the spending cuts. The tax cuts will probably be able to be extended, but the real spending cuts, Congress doesn't like to cut spending. I think what we've seen, Congress has been back home for 2 weeks. There's a lot of pushback. There's a lot of lies about different programs that are going to get cut. The children won't get fed and seniors won't get health care. I think those are all lies. But I think more than ever, it's important for people to contact their members of Congress and say, we want you to do spending cuts, because they don't have the strongest backbones. And they need to hear from people and let them know that, you know, we can't burden our children with any more debt, and that time to cut spending is now.
I couldn't agree more. Jonathan, what are your thoughts on that?
I think there's been such progress already in how we are able to save. You think of the immigration crisis that President Trump walked into, the millions of migrants that were relying on our system, burdening our hospitals, burdening our schools, our local municipalities under the weight of all this illegal immigration, including the criminal aspects. Being able to slow down, if not stop altogether, illegal border crossings, I think we're at the lowest. That does a tremendous job in using American resources that are there just for the citizens and those that are legal residents here. And so I think the border security has done a very instrumental role in making sure that our resources are used for what they're properly used for and not extended to illegal migration. Also at the EPA, seeing some of the cuts that were in place after this so-called Inflation Reduction Act, which was just throwing millions and billions of dollars into these climate initiatives. All that being able to be slowly worked back with the new EPA secretary. I think the stuff that's already been done that probably won't hit the ledger for another year, another 2 years, is already starting to put us in a better economic position. But of course, the markets want some certainty after the tariffs introduction and that announcement. And certainly interest rates are probably that one thing that American borrowers, and most of us are, can sort of see that with lower interest rates, at times consumers are wanting to borrow more and pump more fuel into the economy that helps. And ultimately the employment and unemployment does have balances based on what people are willing to put back into the economy. So there's things that have been done that I think that are great. There are ways that we can sort of turn the dials and make the economy just seem to the American taxpayer that it's working for them again. So, sort of anxious to see how all this comes about.
Well, Marty, what are your thoughts? Chris mentioned about some of the lies that they're telling about Social Security and the kids won't get fed. And Jonathan just brought up the idea we've reduced the cost of illegal immigration by reducing that. The EPA are reducing costs. Do you think these spending cuts can take place? As Chris mentioned, they don't like cutting spending. They like spending our money. I don't understand that.
Well, also, as she said, there's a lot of misinformation out there. The left is very good at ramping up their side and getting their arguments out there and trying to frame the debate on their terms, which oftentimes is very misleading. So I think this Medicaid debate is a key example of that. That's really the big topic that they're discussing right now and trying to get spending under control. The budget resolution calls on, in the House, the Energy and Commerce Committee is the main committee that oversees Medicaid, so it calls for reducing spending through that committee by, I think it's $880 billion over 10 years. So people say, well, the main thing that has to be done there that's under the jurisdiction of that committee is to reduce Medicaid spending. Well, reducing Medicaid spending doesn't mean cutting Medicaid spending. And this is a lot of what happens with Washington parlance. It actually means slowing down the rate of growth. We saw, I believe it was about a 50% increase in Medicaid spending over 5 years. So now they established that as the new baseline, and now they're saying, well, we can't cut spending, which is projecting 5% increases per year over the next good number of years. So they say, well, what if we slow that down to 3% increase? That would be, well, that's cutting spending. See, but that's just kind of trying to be responsible.
Right.
And what happened under Obama really was when you did Obamacare, they put in this incentive for expanding Medicaid, and a lot of the states have been expanding Medicaid, and they put in this perverse incentive that if you sign up able-bodied single adults, the federal government will match 90% of the cost of that. Well, for 3 years, I think it was, they matched 100% of the cost, and now it's 90% forever. And meanwhile, they matched the cost for the people who are really the vulnerable populations, if you will, on Medicaid, the people most in need, the poor people, the disabled people, and so on. They match them at a lower rate, considerably lower rate. So there are things that can be done there, I think, at least trying to control the growth going forward. I think the best thing they could do is make it a block grant, because then the states would actually have incentive to help control the spending. We heard all these kind of horror stories when they were going to do welfare reform. All the poor people are going to be on the streets dying and so on. but it turned out really well, and it really got a lot of people back to work. It gave them the dignity of working. It helped give the states incentive to have what you call skin in the game in terms of reducing spending. I think that's a really key thing. Otherwise, the states have the incentive, well, let's just keep going to Washington, get as much as we can get, make everybody happy and all that. It's not our money. It's the federal government. Well, actually, their taxpayers are paying those federal taxes for that money as well. But I think you just have to, that would be the best single thing they could do, is turn it into a block grant and give the states, they could give them more money over time, but at maybe a little bit slower rate. But a lot of governors would be happy about that, because especially Republican governors, if they get Washington out of their hair a little bit, give them more liberty on how they reform these programs and how they prioritize the spending. So if people want to spend more, the governors and the state legislators, on the vulnerable populations in Medicaid, well, they can do that if they have more discretion on how they spend the money, and maybe they don't have as much incentive to go out and just sign up all the able-bodied people without attaching any kind of work requirement or anything like that. So that's another thing that's under discussion, things like work requirements.
Well, that was one of the key things that you said. Why are able-bodied people that can go out and work on Medicare? Or Medicaid, rather.
Medicaid.
Why are they on Medicaid? I know you mentioned, I guess they get some type of 90% match from the government, so they just put able-bodied people and have no work requirement out of them. Well, that's a big change, I think, that needs to happen. Is that something they're discussing?
They are discussing that. Yeah, they're putting together apparently various options for the committee members, and the committee members, I believe, the week of May 6th or 5th or whatever, that week, I think that's when that Energy and Commerce Committee is going to begin doing their work. And now it looks like they're looking to have the bill on the floor in the House during the week of May 19th, which is the week before Memorial Day. They originally had thought, well, we're going to pass it through both houses, but apparently one of the inside reporting newsletters in Washington has gotten a look at the schedule, and they say, well, it looks like the week of May 19th when it'll be on the floor in the House. Well, therefore, if it's on the floor of the House in that week, the Senate won't be able to do it until after Memorial Day. But nonetheless, it's still, that would be pretty good if they can get that done and actually pass the bill in the House during that week before Memorial Day. That would be a pretty good accomplishment. But it's going to be a big challenge to get from here to there.
Chris, I look like you want to say
Well, I just think it's outrageous for the Democrats to say there's no waste, there's no abuse in any of these programs. We know there are. By definition, it's a Washington program. So, of course, they can eliminate that waste and fraud and abuse and save more of the money for the people who really need it, and not for illegal immigrants and not for able-bodied single men who should be working.
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
heard rhetorically, and I think it's right, as members are in their states, back in their states for the Easter break, to really hear from their constituents. A good exchange that I saw was someone saying, when Republicans and conservatives use the word that these are entitlements, it sort of gives a barrier to folks that actually need it or have paid into it. It was a woman, elderly woman, that presented what I thought was a reasonable, compassionate, heartfelt case for why she needed a little bit more help after paying into it. And that, I think those are reasonable conversations that most Americans can agree with and can understand and won't balk against. It's, as you mentioned, the 27-year-old man who's playing video games all day, that has an incentive from the person that, the lawyer that potentially signed him up, to the governor that's getting more money for his state, to not work and receive the benefits that otherwise should be going to a woman, as she argued, is really in need. I think that's the compassionate approach that Americans have always wanted to do. There's a question as to whether or not government needs to be the intermediary for providing that compassion to individuals, but that's not where the conversation is, and that's not where the Democrats are characterizing it. And so you're stuck in this rut of rhetoric going back and forth, and the two victims of that are going to be, one, the people that may actually use it and actually need it, and second, the American taxpayer that's working 40, 50 hours a week and only amounting more debt personally and more debt for their country because their country's not using their money the right way.
Yep. And so as we can see, there's no easy answer to what's going on in our economy and cutting some spending. But as Marty mentioned, it's just really not cutting the program, it's reducing the spending over time. And as Jonathan and Chris mentioned, people need help sometime. But we got to show compassion, but we have to be responsible in how we spend the taxpayers' money. Thank you for being here with us, and we'll meet you at the next session. Thank you.
I'm excited to announce that we're having a huge sale on overstock and brand new products. For example, MyPillow Percale bed sheets, every color, every style, every size, only $29.88. Our Percale bed sheets are breathable, cool and crisp, and they're perfect for spring and summer. And check out Rev 7, the next generation of energy drinks. It tastes great, and it gives you energy all day with no jitters and no crashes. Best of all, it's actually good for you. And for a limited time, try our 3-pack absolutely free. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save 20% on our Rev 7 12-packs, or try our introductory 3-pack absolutely free. And our Percale bed sheets, all sizes, only $29.88. Twin size, full size, queen size, king sizes, all $29.88. Inventory is extremely limited at this price, so order now.
Somebody comes to us when they are the most vulnerable. We have an obligation to our patients to tell the truth as we learned it and to not politicize it. We are performing surgeries on these children, and the only people benefiting is the medical industrial complex, because the more surgeries that are done, the more money it is made.
Whether you're talking about an 8-year-old or an 11-year-old or a 14-year-old, I don't see how you can actually derive informed consent.
We all know that we can't be getting true informed consent.
Our medical industry has objectively been compromised in more ways than one.
You become familiar with the sound a mother makes when you tell her that her child is dead.
Find out more at whatisadoctor.org.
My name is William Owens, America's poet. During the elections of 2016, I wrote a poem every day, and it's in my book, Poems for America. These poems speak to the issues of our nation like never before. Inspired by God, I know this book of poetry will be a blessing to you, your family, and your community. Visit my website, americaspoet.com.
Let's take a quick history lesson. Just 2 centuries ago, 94% of the people in the world lived in extreme poverty. Today, it's 8.5%. In a century, our life expectancies more than doubled. How did we come so far so fast? The freedom to create, to start a business, to keep what you earn. Don't let the socialists and radical left cost us our progress, our freedom, and our well-being. It's time we fight for America and vote for America.
Hi, welcome to Cure America. I'm Donald Eason, the newest member of Cure's executive team, and I recently attended an opportunity summit hosted by Senator Tim Scott, who is now chairman of the Senate Banking Committee. One of the prominent and very impressive speakers at the policy summit was Dr. O.J. Oleka, CEO of State Financial Officers Foundation. Dr. Oleka has kindly taking time out of his schedule to join us today while he's here in Washington, D.C. I am very pleased to welcome Dr. Oleka to our program today, Cure America.
Pastor, it's good to be with you.
Thank you. Question. You are a child of Nigerian immigrants, and your family story is a great example of realizing the American dream.
Amen.
Can you tell us about your upbringing and how you came to believe so strongly in faith, opportunity, and hard work can pull a family out of poverty? Can you help us with that?
Sure. Well, again, as you pointed out, this started with my parents. My parents came to this country from Nigeria with nothing. They came in 1980 and they worked hard. They played by the rules. And my dad actually ended up studying to become a professor and ended up getting his PhD at Michigan State University. And my mother got her degree to become a labor and delivery nurse. So it was that middle-class life that allowed them to buy a house in Frankfurt, where I grew up. And they put me and my sisters through college. And now their favorite, their baby boy, gets to be sitting in front of you here today talking about the wonderful upbringing that I got. And the reason why it was wonderful, again, as you pointed out, not because it was easy. It wasn't because my parents had everything handed to them, but because they recognized that it was Almighty God and faith in Him that could bring them along in their pathway and in their journey. And those were the things that they taught us, me and my sisters, and that's what my wife and I teach our little girls now. We believe that we are growing up and living in the greatest country in the history of the world. And my parents' example, the opportunities that we get to live now, is proof of that.
Yeah, it's a great time to be alive in America.
Yes, sir.
And when we talk about hard work, it was once said that duty is ours, outcomes are God's. So I appreciate that. What can you tell us about the mission of your organization and that you now lead? I know it's a recent appointment of yours, the State Financial Officers Foundation. What can you tell us about what you do there and what it's about?
Sure. Our job at the State Financial Officers Foundation is to promote fiscally sound public policy in working with key stakeholders to educate the American people on the importance of financial management in a free market economy. Now, what all those big words mean is that we just like to focus on making sure that the people get to keep their money, and that if there's a government policy, that it is best served if it allows the people to keep as much money as they can. It's why we focus on important issues like government efficiency. It's why we focus on issues making sure that debanking, which is when a bank can get rid of your account because they don't like what you believe, we make sure that that doesn't happen or happens less. And it's why we're pushing back against investments that focus on things that have nothing to do with the business. All because that stuff takes away money from hardworking Americans, and we think that's wrong.
Well, you know that Dr. Oleka, that leads us into our next question. During the Biden administration, there was an all-out push for government for diversity, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and strong support for investing in private and government funds, in investment accounts and companies that promoted ESG, environmentally social and governance goals that align with the goals of the progressive movement in America. And some people were debanked because they may not have been in alignment with that.
That's right.
And this allied progressive movement across the world changed a lot of the way the country and the world thinks. And while these objectives on the surface sound good or may look good or they present it well, I know, and like you know, they may not be the best. What is wrong with DEI and ESG policies, and what should we be doing instead?
Well, we certainly shouldn't be doing those things. To break it down real quickly for your listeners who may not know what they are, ESG, again, stands for environmental, social, governance. Environmental is all the climate stuff. It's this belief that you should reorient your entire business, your entire way of life, based on how the left views climate and what's happening in the world. So that means reducing fossil fuels, which is coal, oil, and gas, which leads to high electricity prices and high gas prices for regular Americans for no real reason other than people on the left think that this is a good idea. And then you've also got S, which is social, which is the DEI portion, which I'll come back to in a second. And then you have G, which is governance, the belief that shareholders, people who own parts of a business, should force that business to make decisions that have nothing to do with what that business' actual job is, but instead pushes a particular social ideology that people couldn't get past at the ballot box because it wasn't popular. And again, all that sits in the S, which is DEI. S stands for social, but effectively that is diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Absolutely.
Now, let me make this clear statement. It is very important, and again, this is biblical. Revelation 7:9 says that when you get to heaven, you see the different people who exist from different nations, people, language, and tribe. Where you come from and your background is a good thing. You should take pride and celebrate your history and your heritage. That is very different, though, from DEI as a regime, as a policy that was put forward. As a policy, it was the idea that you should preference different people based on past grievances. So it's current day people getting benefits from something that somebody may or may not have benefited from or experienced years ago. It has nothing to do with someone's skill or ability or merit. And those things are all wrong because it makes a few assumptions. It assumes that because of what you look like, you don't have the same skill as everybody else, and you need the government to put you in a position to succeed. I reject that. As I explained before, my parents worked hard to get to where they got, as I'm sure you did and every single listener on this program did. So when you say something like, I need the government to pull me out of my situation and give me equal opportunity in the sense of equity, which means, again, to give somebody some preference, I reject that wholeheartedly. And what we say is have a clear line of merit. What's the standard? Show me the standard, and I'll do everything I can to meet that standard, and I'll be exceptional, and I'll succeed. So what we say is that ESG, again, environmental social governance, is wrong because it takes money out of the pockets of the people. It puts individuals in a position where you have to deal with racial preferencing, which is an awful thing. And it forces businesses to make decisions that have nothing to do with their business outcomes. Again, it's bad for people, it's bad for Americans, and it's bad for your pocketbook, which is why we're against it.
Perfect. You know what? I want a follow-up question to that. You know, Martin Luther King said he wanted his children to be judged by their character and not by the color of their skin.
That's right.
If we look biblically and we look at DEI, I just want to use this as an example. If you're familiar with the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were captives. And the king said, can you find some young people, some young men that they could educate with the language and the customs? And they educated them, and those three rose to the top, and their friend Daniel as well.
Yep.
They rose to the top, but they were in the governor's or the king's cabinet, but it wasn't because they were the slaves. It was because they had the merit.
That's right.
And so do you see us kind of as a country, or at least stepping away from Martin Luther King's dream and wanting, because DEI, do you see that as a step away, a distance away? And how do we get here from his dream of the content of character, which is merit, versus the color of skin or where someone came from?
Well, DEI definitionally is walking away from Martin's dream, because it says that we should not, in fact, look at the content of someone's character. We should, in fact, look at the color of someone's skin. This is literally what Dr. King was saying we should not do, and it is better for us as a country to not do that. And it really is it's a sad thing, quite frankly, because the country, I think, wants to move on. The question I would have is, for the left, why won't you let us get there? Why do you keep picking at this old scab and this old wound of racial injustice? Let us move on to the point where any single person can achieve their God-given talent. And again, I say God-given talent because Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, when they were in the fire, there was a fourth man with them.
Absolutely.
And it's Almighty God, again, and what the talent he's given us, each individual, that's what carries you through. It is God, not government, that creates your opportunity, that gives you the inalienable rights that you have.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what we're going to. And then this next question is just a kind of a closing question on what we're talking about here today. What else can we do to pull families and more communities out of poverty and to help them to achieve the success and prosperity? You know, you worked hard to get where you are. I've worked hard to get where I am. Of course, we needed God's providential care in our lives. But what else can families do and communities do to pull themselves out? And I'm gonna add this on. It's kind of making the question a little longer. But do you see us moving also in the direction of hopefully a colorless society?
I do. And again, I look at it again from the perspective of Revelation. It's not this idea that you should reject who you are and you should walk away from your background and your ethnicity and your family and your community. You should have pride in all of those things.
Absolutely.
But again, it shouldn't be a skin color that dictates your outcome and your opportunity. So if I ever use the term color of society, that's what I mean, to be colorblind.
Exactly.
It's to, again, focus on somebody's character. So I would look at it from this perspective. What people can do if you are a mother, if you are a father, if you're a grandparent, if you're a big sister, big brother, an auntie, and uncle, be the best one that you can. Because if you show a good example of what it means to be a hardworking, faith-filled adult, then the kids that you impact, that look up to you, will see that. We used to say in college, I was part of this organization called Collegiate 100, and we would say what they see is what they'll be. Real men giving real time, because it was a male organization. So if you do your part to demonstrate what womanhood, what manhood, what being a good adult looks like, kids will follow that. So that's the first example, or the first thing I would say. Second, work very, very hard to make sure that your educational system is doing right by kids. There are too many instances. And again, we were talking about our shared connection to Detroit. The federal government scores that just came out, or the federal organization, NAEP, the scores that just came out for kids in Detroit, for black boys. You know what the reading scores were? 4%. 4% of black boys in Detroit can read at grade level. This is an unconscionable thing. So if you are a parent in Detroit or a similarly situated community where the skills and the percentages are the same, you've got to push for better outcomes in your public schools and push for school choice and parental opportunities that allow you to take your kid and the dollars that you pay in taxes to follow that child that you care about so deeply. So again, educational opportunity, attainment, and school choice, that's the second one. And then the third one is financial literacy. You need to make sure that you understand how money works, how it moves, because those are the things that are going to impact generational wealth. If you want to build wealth in your family, you have to understand and teach kids very early the importance of saving, the importance of investing, of spending less than you have, and again, the value of tithing. There's only one time in Scripture that God says, test me. And it's in Malachi when he's talking about tithing.
Absolutely.
He says, test me in this. So if you give your 10% back to God, then he's going to show you that you can thrive exceedingly and abundantly. So again, the three things: be a good adult, make sure that your educational opportunity for kids is as best as it can be and you're promoting school choice, and make sure that you understand financial literacy and how it works through saving, investing, and tithing.
Excellent, excellent. And before we close out, what is it you like to say about your organization, and do you offer any kind of financial literacy? Because it's amazing. You mentioned education. Mm-hmm. We can go through literally 12 years of a public school education, and they talk very little about money and financial responsibility. So give us a commercial, if you will, where they can find you online, where they can get in contact with you, and what kind of resources that they can obtain from you as it relates to financial literacy.
Absolutely. Well, you can find us online at sfof.com. And the thing that's most important is you should look at our financial officers, our elected officials across the country, because again, they are pushing financial literacy in their states. These are elected officials, treasurers, auditors, comptrollers, who are trying to make sure, again, that kids at every level, that adults can get the financial literacy and the financial competency that they need to succeed. So in a number of states, we've passed and are trying to pass financial literacy bills to make it a course, to make it a program, but to make it accessible for people so they can understand these things. So you can figure out who your financial officer is, can your state treasurer, your state auditor or comptroller at our website, sfof.com.
All right, thank you. And any final words, Dr. Oleka? Any final words?
I just appreciate you, the good work that you're doing, and again for your audience, hold the line, keep the fight, keep the faith going, because that's what we're called to do in this work and the things we do every day.
Well, we again like to thank Dr. Oleka for visiting us here at Cure America, and we look forward to more conversations with him in the future. It's a lot we could have talked about today, but this is all the time we have. So thank you again for joining us at Cure America.
My name is William Owens, America's poet. During the elections of 2016, I wrote a poem every day, and it's in my book, Poems for America. These poems speak to the issues of our nation like never before. Inspired by God, I know this book of poetry will be a blessing to you, your family, and your community. Visit my website, americaspoet.com.
somebody comes to us when they are the most vulnerable, we have an obligation to our patients to tell the truth as we learned it and to not politicize it. We are performing surgeries on these children, and the only people benefiting is the medical industrial complex, because the more surgeries that are done, the more money it is made.
Whether you're talking about an 8-year-old or an 11-year-old or a 14-year-old, I don't see how you can actually derive informed consent.
We all know that we can't be getting true informed consent.
Our medical industry has objectively been compromised in more ways than one.
You become familiar with the sound a mother makes when you tell her that her child is dead.
Find out more at whatisadoctor.org.
Let's take a quick history lesson. Just 2 centuries ago, 94% of the people in the world lived in extreme poverty. Today, it's 8.5%. In a century, our life expectancies more than doubled. How did we come so far so fast? The freedom to create, to start a business, to keep what you earn. Don't let the socialists and radical left cost us our progress, our freedom, and our well-being. It's time we fight for America and vote for America.
I'm excited to announce that we're having a huge sale on overstock and brand new products. For example, My Pillow Percale bed sheets, every color, every style, every size, only $29.88. Our Percale bed sheets are breathable, cool and crisp, and they're perfect for spring and summer. And check out Rev 7, the next generation of energy drinks. It tastes great, and it gives you energy all day with no jitters and no crashes. Best of all, it's actually good for you. And for a limited time, try our 3-pack absolutely free. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save 20% on our Rev 7 12-packs, or try our introductory 3-pack absolutely free. And our Percale bed sheets, all sizes, only $29.88. Twin size, full size, queen size, king sizes, all $29.88. Inventory is extremely limited at this price, so order now.
We all know we're going to die, eventually. But what happens after we die? Maybe at death, you simply cease to exist. Your body turns to dust, and, well, that's it. Game over. Or maybe something does happen after you die. What if life somehow continues? Maybe you're reborn as someone or something else. Then you die, then you're reborn, then you die, and so on, until you're finally enlightened and become one with the universe. Or perhaps you become a shadowy ghost, wandering in the underworld. Or maybe you're judged on how good you've been. If you've done more good than bad, you win. Here's the problem. If you're alive, there's no way to know what it's like after death. Unless someone dies, then comes back to life and tells us about it. According to his followers, that's precisely what Jesus did. If this claim is true, then he can provide us with a clear picture of what lies ahead. Jesus told us there is a heaven, but also a hell. Your response matters because your view of the next life affects how you live this life and whether you'll be prepared for what lies ahead. None of us knows when it'll be our turn. But notice, each of these after-death scenarios contradicts the others. If one is correct, the others aren't. One option is unique. Jesus Christ is the only person who actually conquered death. And Christ offers his life to you, giving you a new life that can begin now and continue after death in heaven. A life that doesn't depend on your goodness, but on his. Are you ready for death? You can be.
But I wanted to switch gears a little bit. The Supreme Court heard 2.5 hours of oral arguments on religious liberty and parental rights case involving an LGBTQ curriculum at the Montgomery County, Maryland public school system in implementing for elementary school students, LGBTQ program for elementary school students. And they are refusing to let parents opt out, or let me say it, they are refusing to let parents opt their children out of these sessions. I just need to repeat that. They are refusing to let parents opt their children out of these sessions. And there are some news reports that suggest arguments went well for the parents, which is, I am glad to hear that, and that the Supreme Court is likely to overrule the lower courts and uphold the parents' rights. That should be a no-brainer, I think, but we'll discuss that. Of course, you can never tell what the justices will do and how they will rule based on the questions and the comments during the oral arguments, but the presence of the Trump-appointed justices on the high court is giving many social conservatives and a lot of Christians optimism that the court will decide in favor of religious liberty and the parents to direct and uphold their children. And you know, from where I sit, the Bible says it tells parents to train up their children, so that their right is embedded. But let me ask you a question. If you had a chance to observe the oral arguments, and are you concerned where this country is going, and at the point they're taking away parental rights? I know, Chris, you waited to answer this question. And what do you think? How do you think this will come out in the Supreme Court, and what's going on in our country with this? But Maryland is one place, and then I just want to bring this up too. They're also in Colorado trying to take, I don't know if you've read that, they're trying to take away the parental rights in Colorado if a parent doesn't go along with a child that's wanting to send their LGBTQIA+ or something like that. So what are your thoughts on, do you have concerns on that? I'm going to start with you, Chris, because as a mother.
I do have concerns, primarily because Montgomery County, Maryland, they're starting as young as 3 in their pre-kindergarten program to read books. One of the books that they planned to use was something called Pride Puppy, about a little puppy who goes to a pride parade, and it's like ABC, and one of the words is leather, one of the words is drag queen, and the little kid is supposed to identify all these pictures. Now, they did end up pulling that one, but what the state is saying, what the county is saying, is that in order to foster kindness and acceptance, we need to use these LGBTQ books. The parents say, no, this is basically religious indoctrination. And so they're asking that they be allowed to have their kids go into another room and read another book. This is like in an English class. This is, they're not even doing it in a health class because little kids aren't divided out by that. But this, the justices on the conservative side were very supportive of parental rights and the religious liberty. But I think it's also important to remember, whether you're religious or not, you have the right to direct the upbringing of your children.
Absolutely.
So Christians, Muslims, Jewish people are very concerned about these, but there's atheists that don't want these books taught as well, and their rights should be respected. This is a political ideology, LGBTQ, and it should not be introduced in these young grades, or at least give parents the right to say, you know what, Dick and Jane Spot books were perfectly okay.
Yeah. They did.
They did us well, right? Yeah.
And I'm going to come to Jonathan last. Marty, what are your thoughts on it? And I'm coming to Jonathan because I know you have young children, so I really want to get your thoughts on it. What are your thoughts and concerns?
I think it's just kind of an overall arrogance that the left people, a lot of them educated in Ivy League and other liberal institutions, they think they know better than everybody else. They have this idea, we're going to make the country great in their view, and they're going to reform the country, and that it's been too bigoted and that sort of thing in the past. And they really do think that a lot of the parents are kind of stupid. They just don't know what's best for their children, and therefore they're going to kind of take over because they think the parents in many respects are harming the children by teaching teaching them their values. So therefore, they want to just kind of not even let them know what's going on. They don't want them to see the curriculum. They don't even want them to know that this class is being taught in many cases. So it's a big problem. It's just that overall, like, we know better than you do type of attitude. And so I think that's a big problem, and parents are starting to stand up and say, no, we know better about how to raise our children, and we, as you say, we have that God-given responsibility to be the ones to take the lead in doing that. So I think it's just trying to recapture basic rights of parents, and I think it's a healthy thing that parents are standing up. And like Chris said, I think was that we now have some justices on the Supreme Court, thanks to President Trump's appointments in his first term, who seem inclined to respect the right of parents and respect religious liberty, and again, religious liberty can mean even people who are agnostic or atheist. They have the right to believe or not to believe. That's what our country is about.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I want to come to you last, Jonathan, because I know you have young children, and Marty mentioned something that they think they know better than the parents. You know, what are your concerns as a young parent and raising up young children and coming into this situation? What are your thoughts about that?
I'm glad you asked me my thoughts. I think, you know, the parents that were at the court that actually brought the case to the court, I got to sit down with two of them. And conversations that we had were just what parents care about. You know, are we shuttling our kids back and forth to practice on time? Are they getting to school on time? Is there food on the table? Are we being able to raise them in a way that reflects, you know, how we were raised, or ultimately raise them in a way that they respect who God is, respect the Bible, and understand their place in this world, understand who Jesus Christ is and the forgiveness for their sins. That's where our conversation was, me and the two parents that brought the case forward. And most parents, that's where they are. They're worried about raising their children. When difficult conversations come up, conversations of sexuality, conversations of, you know, was it fine to date, or, you know, what's going to be your approach in finding a spouse, parents also want to be the first ones that introduce that to their children and be the ones that walk them through the very difficult, sometimes, you know, tinderbox, explosive conversations around sexuality. Parents know their children best and want to be able to work with their children based on their age and their competency as to what the children's ultimately decision will be. And so the case hinged on exposure versus coercion.
This is the case in Maryland you're talking about.
Yeah, this is the case in Maryland. Exposure versus coercion. So Maryland was effectively saying, well, we have your kids here for, you know, 6 to 8 hours of the day. We think that we should be introducing them to what they call alternative lifestyles, but what the Bible calls sin, right? Same-sex couples. You know, the Bible is clear that it is sinful. It goes against God's design. Religious parents of all different cloths. So the Ethiopian Orthodox were named plaintiffs. You had Muslim parents that were named plaintiffs, and it was a majority of communities, cross-section of Montgomery County parents are just saying, no, this violates our faith. It violates our parental ability to be the first to introduce this. We want to at least know if this is being taught, and if we know that this is being taught, give us, like 47 other states have, opt-out, an opportunity to opt out of this instruction or other type of opt-out frameworks. You know, 47 states allow parents to opt out of certain content, even for individualized education programs, there's opt-out systems. So this was very workable. They could have done this, and it's reflective of where the school or government schools should be. A vehicle to, you know, train children in reading, writing, and arithmetic, but not usurp the parents' authority when it comes to introducing critical moral and ethical matters to children. But Montgomery County came in and says, we're going to take over this entire space completely. We're going to remove any opt-out option. And to Chris's point, it's what they're actually teaching kids. So arguments yesterday is that, oh, we just want it to be inclusive, or teach them that it's you're only fair or nice if you're treating different kids from different families a certain way. But what they're teaching kids is that a doctor just guesses whether or not they're male and female. It's not really based on anything. It can change literally by the weather if you're not feeling during the season that you're a certain sex. And so kids were coming home in this particular case. I know I'm talking a while, but kids came home to their parents saying, I'm a little confused, right? I thought that I was a boy. And parents were like, yeah, you are a boy. But my teacher, 5-year-old, 8-year-old, is telling me something else. And so parents started being alerted to the fact that, well, this is a little different and confusing our child. let us be the first ones to help our child through these discussions. But Montgomery County is saying, no, parents, you don't have the opportunity, one, to even know that this is going on. And when you do know this is going on, you don't have the opportunity to be the first ones to teach your kids by opting them out. So it's a framework, when you're listening to the argument, it's a framework that most Americans kind of know where they fall. It's difficult that it has to rise to the level of a Supreme Court case to meet this all out in public, but I'm glad it's out there. I'm glad folks are engaged, and it's out in the open, what is otherwise being done behind closed doors outside of parents, outside of the parents' attention and outside of the parents' knowledge of it. So it's good that that case is out there. We'll certainly see where the justices fall on. And
let me just say, on that point of what the school is saying the problem is, if you read some news reports and even listen to the arguments or read their documents, what the school is arguing is that too many parents are opposed to these books. So half the class is opting out, and we simply can't have that. We simply can't have. So it's not like it's one or two parents. Yeah. Their problem is too many parents are unhappy. Therefore, we must shove it down everyone's throat. Because those religious parents, how dare they tell us we can't tell their 4-year-old, the doctor just took a guess on whether you were a boy or a girl.
Well, that actually goes to Marty's point, that they're elitists,
yes,
that they think they know better than the parents. I mean, that is unbelievable.
Right.
And so with the few minutes we have left, I want to give you all a 1-minute closing argument on this. And this is the question: how do you think the court is going to rule? And do we need to actually talk about sexuality for our children to be kind to one another?
I will say that we don't need to talk about sexuality in elementary schools to be kind, and I think the court will come down on the side of the parents on religious grounds, but I don't think they'll extend it to parents who don't have a religious affiliation. I think they'll do a very limited thing and say, you used to offer the opt-out, you have to do it again.
Okay. Marty, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think the court will come down on the side of the parents. And I think what this highlights, again, is the need for more opportunities for parents to send their kids to the schools of their choice. There are a lot of parents who don't have the financial means. They're not wealthy, but it's expensive to send your child to a private school or even to have a homeschooling arrangement that you work on with other groups of parents and so on. But I think we are seeing that around the country. There are more and more cases where states are passing these school choice things. And I think that as parents see this more and more, you're hearing about a lot of parents starting to take their kids out of the public schools because they're really tired of having this sort of thing go on. And I think it would be a healthy thing. It injects competition into the whole education field, but it also gives parents more options to really send their children to schools that the fabric of that school really reflects their values, and everything about that school reflects their values. It's not just in teaching one class, but in every class throughout the day.
I couldn't agree more. I'll give you the final word, John.
Sure. Well, yeah. Think of what Maryland did in reaction to this, and that shows where this culture is. So Maryland sort of doubled down, removed the opt-out. In this past session, they passed a bill that'll go to the governor. He'll probably sign it to remove general opt-out, to really empower the state superintendent to really come down on counties that want to continue offer opt-out. So we have to realize where we are in this culture. It's a culture that has at a point aggressively adopted the LGBT agenda, and they need to continue to make converts, and so they're doing so as young as 3 years old. The one thing that stands against this is Bible-believing parents that say, I believe what the Bible says about God creating them male and female. I believe what the Bible says about a man leaving his mother and father, being joined to his wife, and the two becoming one flesh. I believe that because God says it. I believe that because nature reflects it, and I will fight till death to ensure that my progeny, my children, and those around me are raised in a culture that reflects God's truth on this issue.
Thank you, Jonathan. I couldn't have said it better. Thank you, panel. We've had, again, another lively discussion. I think the next time we get together, let's talk about school choice, because that's a big subject, a big argument that's going on now in our country as well, and I think it's important. And so as we close out today's segment, you've heard it here, and if you're a parent a grandparent, a concerned citizen for what they're teaching our children, we strongly recommend that you contact your congressmen, your senators, and tell them that you want to be able to opt out of this kind of teaching to our children. It doesn't really matter your religious background. It's about taking care of our children and giving parents their rightful place in their children's lives, which is parental rights to dictate the teachings for their children. Thank you again for being with us here on Q America. And remember, in all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. May God bless you.
Let's take a quick history lesson. Just 2 centuries ago, 94% of the people in the world lived in extreme poverty. Today, it's 8.5%. In a century, our life expectancy is more than doubled. How did we come so far so fast? The freedom to create, to start a business, to keep what you earn. Don't let the socialists and radical left cost us our progress, our freedom, and our well-being. It's time we fight for America and vote for America.
We all know we're going to die. Eventually. But what happens after we die? Maybe at death, you simply cease to exist. Your body turns to dust, and, well, that's it. Game over. Or maybe something does happen after you die. What if life somehow continues? Maybe you're reborn as someone or something else. Then you die, then you're reborn, then you die, and so on, until you're finally enlightened and become one with the universe. Or perhaps you become a shadowy ghost, wandering in the underworld. Or maybe you're judged on how good you've been. If you've done more good than bad, you win. Here's the problem. If you're alive, there's no way to know what it's like after death. Unless someone dies, then comes back to life and tells us about it. According to his followers, that's precisely what Jesus did. If this claim is true, then he can provide us with a clear picture of what lies ahead. Jesus told us there is a heaven, but also a hell. Your response matters because your view of the next life affects how you live this life and whether you'll be prepared for what lies ahead. None of us knows when it'll be our turn. But notice, each of these after-death scenarios contradicts the others. If one is correct, the others aren't. One option is unique. Jesus Christ is the only person who actually conquered death. And Christ offers his life to you, giving you a new life that can begin now and continue after death in heaven. A life that doesn't depend on your goodness, but on his. Are you ready for death? You can be.